Well, I just want to start off with, why did I get interested in cultural orientations? Well, as a young child, when I first started school, I went to an international school where there were people from all the diplomatic corps that were my classmates. They came from all over the world, and I was a minority in my class, even though I was a local person. I went to the convent of St. Mary, and there were kids from USA, UK, Germany, Australia, Indonesia. As I can remember, they were all different kids that came from from the diplomatic corps that were in my class. So to me, at a very young age, like 6 years old, I knew that the globe was right in my hand, that the world was right there, and that we were all different. And we looked different, but we were all friends and we played together. And so I started to understand how people were from different parts of the world. But in my mind at that age, I was programmed that living together was possible, right? And then, of course, as you grow up and you start listening to all the world's challenges and so on, living in a country as a minority in the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, I also realized that I was different. I spoke English, I had a different religion from those of my other classmates. By now, I was in a different school. I wasn't in the same school with the diplomatic corps. So the seeds got sown. And so my personal interest when I finished high school, the subjects that I got the highest marks in were geography, history, and English literature. All the people subjects. I wasn't cut out to be an accountant or an actuarian as my father wanted me to be. So I really got interested in these different cultural orientations. I was exposed to all the religions, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism. Later on in life, it was also Buddhism. I realized there were also different dimensions in all of these religions. And so I started to see how beliefs and so on became part of the human being. So that's how my interest started at a very young age. And then later on, I came to Canada. And in Canada, I was in for a rude shock because my first job, I got told that I didn't speak English with a British accent. And all the years I went to school in Pakistan, it was enforced. You're writing a British exam, you're not going to speak like a babu. Your English has to be perfect. So I thought I spoke perfect English. And then I started to realize when people call me some of the names that are taboo now, that I was not a Canadian, I was an immigrant. And so then I got more involved in cultural understanding people's cultures and so on. So does that answer your question?
Yes, very, very clearly. So the realization came. Do you think that in cities, another question is, do you think in cities where there is cosmopolitan culture, sometimes treats people differently at different times?
Well, I wouldn't use the word, okay. In multicultural societies, it depends on where the hierarchy is, right? So we're not speaking about it being different. It's not talking about being indifferent. It's talking about we need to have an understanding that in the end, we're all human. Just like John Lennon sings in his song, Imagine, all the people living in a world where we treat each other as one, right? We don't have an understanding that we're all human beings And we might come from different countries and we might look different and we might practice different religions and we speak different languages. But inside, the hidden, the implicit, we're all the same. And we all have different attributes. And that's what the COF assessment is designed to draw out. As a coach, I'm certified in other assessment tools also. I really believe that the COF tool helps give a label to those internal dimensions that each one of us uniquely possesses. And in a team, if we were to understand each other, because we've all come from different perceptions, right? Different backgrounds, we were raised differently, different schools. If you think about me, I went to an international school. At the age of 5, 6, I was speaking in an American accent because my teacher was American. Most of my classmates were American. And this is living in Karachi in Pakistan. I had an American accent. Then I get moved to another city in Pakistan where there were no foreigners, nobody from the diplomatic corps. I went to the Punjab. But then I was raised by Belgian nuns. And that's when I learned about Belgian chocolates. And you see, the perception gets on. Then I came back. Then I wrote a British exam. I did English literature, Shakespeare. These are all things that shape us, right? They make us different. And then I come to Canada. And then I have this experience. Then I go back to South Asia. I worked in 11, 12 different countries. So I cannot just say I'm South Asian just because I was born in that part of the world. I have so many different cultural orientations that make me unique. And so do other people. They have all different orientations, but we need to understand so that we can work together and live together and bring out the best version of ourselves.
What are the main challenges individuals face when communicating across cultures?
When you say main challenges, when you ask me, the main challenge is lack of understanding. Okay, just lack of understanding. We get judged by how we look, the explicit. But if we only took the time to understand, okay, and the 7 categories in the COF assessment, I would say that I'm talking about Philip Rosinski's book, Coaching Across Cultures, where he talks about the categories and the dimensions. Okay, if we were to only understand those categories and those dimensions and learn about the implicit preferences that we have within us, it would make the world a much better place to live in. It would help individuals, it would help organizations, and it would help the community as a whole.
Okay, my next question would be, how can intercultural communication play a role in the cohesion of population?
How can intercultural communication help? Again, it's by understanding, right? In the Philip Rosinski's cultural orientation framework, when you talk about communication patterns, I'll give you one example. This was when I was coaching today with a woman that came from the Caribbean. She says to me that I have a problem. Everybody at work says that I speak straight from the hip. I said, that means you're a direct communicator. And she said, yeah, I offend people because I speak straight from the hip. I don't camouflage anything. And I said, okay, and those people around you might be indirect. She said, oh yeah, everything is like, put it under the carpet, don't offend somebody, say it the best way you can, cover it up with icing and, whatever, so that person doesn't get hurt, doesn't get offended. Now, coming from the background that she came from in the Caribbean, where she learned to speak directly, say it like it is, she's having to understand the person that can't say it like it is. So in order to deal and live happily, if she knows that she's a direct communicator and the other person is indirect, they can start to understand each other. And instead of being at one end of the pendulum to the other swinging, they can decide to come somewhere in the middle where they can soften the blow. The direct one can soften the blow, and the indirect one can understand that the direct communicator does not mean any harm. That's just their preferred style, their innate, their implicit way of communicating.
Okay, my next question would be, how does language proficiency affect intercultural communication? And what steps can be taken?
Language proficiency doesn't come into intercultural communication at all, because we're talking about culture. The book has been translated in Spanish, in Russian, in French, in Ukrainian, whatever. That's my philosophy.
Okay, what are some common stereotypes or misconceptions that can hinder effective intercultural communication, and how can they do it?
What are some common
stereotypes or misconceptions?
Stereotypes and biases and all, yes, they do interfere. But those come from the explicit, right? And that's what's so wonderful about Philip Rosinski's cultural orientation framework, that it eliminates. That's why he calls it D&I, Diversity Inclusion 3.0. It's not one where we're just looking at visible minorities. We have a quota, we hire them. The D&I 2, we have policies and procedures inside an organization to deal with this. But 3 is about looking at the person as a whole. Who are you from the inside, and how can I work the best with you? And in this context, what comes to mind, when I was getting into human resources and training and coaching, I used to do workshops all over the world in true colors. Your true colors. Your true colors were not about your skin color or your religion or your shape or your size, but it was based on Myers-Briggs. So it told you if you were introvert or extrovert, if you were intuitive, if you were thinking, if you're judgmental, perceptive, and so on. People loved it. Until today, people use the acronym IENFJ and so on. Well, it's the same thing. Those internal preferences, your style that you have developed, that's what the cultural orientation framework brings to the surface. So it can talk about your orientation to time. Okay, time is scarce, time is plentiful. Two ends of the pendulum. Scarce person wants to do it, they're anxious, I got to do this today, I got to do this. They're anxious if it doesn't get done. And somebody with a plentiful time orientation, they go, yeah, I'm going to get it done. They know the time is going to be there. It's going to get done, but they're not anxious about it, right? So they're different orientations.